Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 2. This is our backup channel. We should be back on McDuff Lives next week. I think my suspension started on Monday, so probably won't be till Tuesday. But anyway, good to see you. Hello, Corky. And wow, where is everybody? Usually a number. Oh, I know what it is because the backup channel and people. It just takes a while for folks to adjust. Hello, Melissa. Glad you're here. Thanks for checking in on the chat. Welcome to all those that choose not to join the chat. I'm glad to have you here too. Um, it's fun to have that chat. It's kind of multitasking for me because I'm thinking of the book and then I'm thinking of my own thoughts and then I'm sometimes able to check over with the chat and participate a little bit. Hello, Barbara. Hello, being here, and Deborah Johnson. Deborah, thank you so much for all the great work that you did to catalog and organize my McDuff photos. Like to get together with you again sometime soon and work a little bit more on organizing all this. And be good to see you. Hello, Bonnie Bradley. How are you? All of a sudden, and Tyrone is here. All right. I ran out of my ginger tea packets, so we're roughing it tonight with just straight water, H2O. But oh, that's good for you. Yeah, wonderful, great. I miss you. I miss everybody. Um, I wish I could have made it to more of the charrettes that have been happening around the country, but uh, we get a lot of work done, and it's all good, right? It's all good. Yeah, I need to go up to the store. We have a an organic market that I like that sells these little packets of uh, what is it? It's some little religious thing. Is the name of it. Anyway, it's honey and ginger crystals. Very nice. Okay, so we are on page 185, and this is the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. Well, I'm not sure that I'm all that worried about a war on democracy. I'm more worried about a war on our republic, if you know what I mean. But I am very concerned about the war on our republic, and I'm also just appalled at the attacks upon our public health. You know, this all goes back to Rockefeller policy. It is about eugenics. It is Henry Kissinger's NSSM 200, which should be notorious because it basically sets forth the idea that we're going to have to cut down the populations of countries where population growth is, is threatening to us. And that means eugenics. That means um, trying to figure out a way to subtly cut the birth rate in all the countries that are listed in William Engdahl's book that we read, which really nails it as far as I'm concerned. That the the GMO, all of it, is part of an overall policy of taking control of humanity through manipulated food and now manipulated um, therapies, as Mark Kulak puts it. Genetic therapy, just what I don't want. No, I don't want genetic therapy. Thank you. Oh boy. What's uh what's really bothering me is the appalling lack of care over the fate of people that they give experimental therapy injections to. And this little caption, "The End of Science," is a good place to start on page 185 because it really shows how this is not at all scientific. And so he calls it the end of science. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the author. Okay, here we go. According to Mark Gabrish Conlon, the Department of Health and Human Services decided from now on we are only going to fund AIDS research that assumes that Robert Gallo's virus is the cause. Dr. Fauci will not fund research into any other possibilities. There it is, right there. Therefore, those scientists who might have wanted to critique Gallo's papers would not be able to do so, at least not with anything supported by the federal government, which is virtually all science in this country today from that moment on. So to just make a comment about that, if you go back to, and I do want to get back to this very, very informative book, Rockefeller Medicine Men, because this is like the front end of the train, and this is the where we're at right now. The two books work together to explain it, but by accepting the sponsorship of corporate largesse, first the medicine was affected by the private foundation money, and that was in the 20s and 30s and 40s. However, one of the things that happened as a result or concurrently with World War II was that the government expanded so much into health policy that it now became the main funder of all medical research, along with the foundations. But still, the idea that by when is this 1980s, the government is funding virtually all medical research, and you've got to know that's not a good thing for health because governments are run by politicians, and politicians have agendas and donors and spooks after them and intrigue and all kinds of. You just don't want your health system run by politicians. That's my opinion. For 36 years, Fauci targeted all federal grants toward the single pathogen theory of AIDS, the single pathogen meaning Gallo's and Montagnier's virus. For 36 years, Fauci targeted all federal grants toward the single pathogen theory of AIDS. The quote, little emperor made NIAID the go-to agency for AIDS research grants and spent lavishly so long as grant writers towed the official line about the purported viral cause of AIDS, the only hypothesis for which NIAID would provide funding. He used his awesome leverage to discourage inquiry into any multifactorial hypothesis. The PIs that he funded, and remember, PIs is what is it? It's not professional investigators, but like they're people that are skilled in analysis of proposed um, drugs, I guess. So PIs that work for Fauci. The PIs that he funded became his ideological commissars. The growing enterprise became the launch platform for his career as the most successful medical science bureaucrat in American history. Note he didn't say doctor. And isn't that what Mark Kulak was just so focused on about a week ago, or maybe a little bit longer? But his shows developed in me the strong idea that what's wrong here is that we don't have doctors operating under traditional doctor medical ethics. Instead, we have these people that are called scientists that don't take a Hippocratic oath. And in fact, their view of public health may very well be a whole lot closer to the Nazis than to any traditional American feeling about what public health means. I'm serious. These folks are willfully injecting people with poisons and knowing. Well, let him tell the story. I'm get off the soapbox. It's just shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. One of the inevitable outcomes of this confirmation biased research was the rapidly expanding definition of AIDS. Dr. Fauci's battalion of scientists implemented a wide ranging HIV testing program using indiscriminate PCR tests capable of amplifying tiny strands of long dead genetic debris billions of times. The PCR test could not identify active HIV infection. Mullis, who invented the tests, pointed out that the PCR was capable of finding HIV signals in large segments of the population who suffered no threat from HIV and had no live HIV virus in their bodies. Researchers naturally found harmless HIV DNA detritus in people with a constellation of other diseases. All those unrelated ailments soon became incorporated beneath the umbrella definition of AIDS. Individuals with candida or Kaposi's sarcoma and a positive PCR test had AIDS. Those same individuals with a negative PCR test would have Kaposi's sarcoma or candida. Under this rubric, the AIDS definition rapidly metastasized to encompass a galaxy of some 30 separate well known diseases, including Kaposi's sarcoma, Hodgkin's disease, herpes zoster, that is shingles, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which is PCP, Burkitt's lymphoma, isoporiasis, Salmonella septicemia, and tuberculosis, all of which also occur in individuals who had no HIV infection. Most people consider it blasphemous when you point out AIDS is not a disease, it's a syndrome, quote unquote, says Paul Pilpot, MS, the editor of Rethinking AIDS. Quote, it's a collection of diseases, and those diseases get called AIDS if they occur in a patient that the doctor somehow concludes is HIV positive, unquote. All of these diseases in the category called AIDS occur to people who are HIV negative. None of them are exclusive to people who test HIV positive, and all of them have causes and treatments that are well known. They're completely unrelated to HIV. So any of the diseases, when they happen to somebody who tested HIV negative, are called by their old name. But when they occur in someone who tested HIV positive, then they're called AIDS. Unquote. Wow, does that resonate today or what? PCR tests, cranking up the PCRs to unreasonable numbers of rotations to the point where you're finding remnants of things that are long, long dead and completely irrelevant to your health, creating funding incentives for doctors to diagnose and hospitals to treat and medical schools to teach and interns to learn and believe. So what I'm seeing here is like Fauci running a narrative with an agenda, getting a huge tap into the federal government, which means our pockets, for extraordinary amounts of research based on only one theory of an unsolved disease, ignoring all other possible causes. Well, if that's not resonating with you over the past 2 years, and as Mark's been saying, the names are the same. What did President Bush say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Um, well, I can't remember how he screwed it up, but it was funny. Um, you can't be fooled again. That's what he said. Well, can we? Can we be fooled again, America? Are we ready? Are we going to let them get away with fooling us? You know, again. I don't know. I tell you, I take a lot of hope from the fact that somebody with the stature and obvious dedication of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has put this book together. It undermines the narrative that's being fed to all of us constantly by the media and the politicians on both sides. Bob Marley's line is you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So now you see the light. Stand up for your rights. That's what we need to do, you know. We need to just go get up, stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Get up, stand up. Don't put up. Don't give up the fight. Yeah, we ought to be chanting that on the mall. Everybody's being mesmerized by shiny things and scary clowns. Scary clowns don't work once you realize that they're scary clowns. You know, that's what they do. That's their gig. Hey, I'm a scary clown. I'm here to scare you. Oh, well, that's very funny. Get up, stand up. Kathy Sue's birthday. Oh, Kathy Sue. Kathy Sue, Kathy Sue. Here, Olivia is going to have to wish you a happy birthday. Happy birthday. Hey, happy birthdays. One more time. Happy birthday, Kathy Sue. From me and Drummer and Olivia and Totos. We wish you a very, very happy birthday, and we love you. We really do. Always welcome. Come back to Mystery Island. Spend some time here with us. Love to see you, Kathy. Hey, Norman Smith's here too. You got to come back and visit us too, buddy. Hey, I've been working on my chess game. You're going to be surprised. I've been working on it. Don't try that Italian thing though. I'm not into that. Okay, trying to lighten it up a little with a very heavy, heavy subject tonight. But thank you for being with me, and thanks for paying attention to all the horror stories that we have to encounter when we study this incredible, incredible thing, incredible crime against humanity. My opinion. In the hands of Dr. Fauci's opportunistic PIs, AIDS became an amorphous malady subject to ever changing definitions, encompassing a multitude of old diseases in hosts who test positive for HIV. Asked to define AIDS in a 2009 documentary, Fauci said, quote, when your CD4 count falls below a certain arbitrary level, by definition, you have AIDS, unquote. But how do we explain the many individuals who have low CD4 counts and no HIV? The growth of the AIDS pandemic was predictably explosive, using PCR and expanded diagnosis. WHO that estimates that HIV has infected 78 million people and caused 39 million deaths. Today, 35 million people live with HIV, with over 2 million new infections per year. This loose diagnostic system and the gravy train of financial incentives for finding AIDS everywhere guaranteed riches for institutions and individuals who signed on to Dr. Fauci's gold rush. The pharmaceutical multinationals like GlaxoSmithKline, minting enormous profits marketing antivirals to kill HIV, had little incentive to challenge Dr. Fauci's orthodoxy. All right, on to Africa. Africa's AIDS Bonanza. With grants from Tony Fauci, intrepid researchers quickly found that the contagion had somehow reached Africa and infected up to 25 million Africans, with no one having taken notice. Researchers extrapolating from small cohorts with positive PCR results, cohorts meaning a small group. A scientific cohort would have to have been of a certain size to qualify as legitimate. Anyway, you know what I mean. This is extrapolating from small cohorts, which is exactly, again, another resonance with the treatment we've been given for the current um, pandemic, soon to be downgraded to epidemic. Researchers extrapolating from small cohorts with positive PCR results used murky statistical models to report HIV had infected nearly half the adult population in some nations and forecast widespread depopulation of the African continent. Well, they got that part right, didn't they? None of the shrilly predicted depopulation has ever occurred, and most HIV infected Africans showed no sign of illness. In those who were sick, the infirmities looked very much like the illnesses that doctors had previously diagnosed, as malaria, pneumonia, malnutrition, leprosy, bilharzia, anemia, tuberculosis, dysentery, or infection with a grim inventory of pathogens and parasites familiar to doctors in Africa. Because HIV antibody tests are too costly for widespread use in Africa, the World Health Organization has, since 1985, used the quote, Bangui definition, unquote, to diagnose AIDS based on clinical symptoms. WHO's enthusiasm for this loose, all encompassing definition may reflect the early revelations that AIDS plague loosened purse strings like no other crisis on Africa's beleaguered landscapes. The statistical picture of AIDS in Africa, consequently, is a sketchy projection based on very rough computer generated estimates from the World Health Organization, WHO, built on a highly questionable data pool, dubious assumptions, and grotesque exaggeration. Uncertainty prevails, even in those extremely rare cases where doctors actually performed HIV tests on Africans. Many diseases that are endemic to Africa, such as malaria, TB, flu, and simple fevers, trigger false positives. Duisberg and many other critics accuse Dr. Fauci and an opportunistic pharmaceutical industry of taking this long inventory of ancient afflictions and recasting them as AIDS. Pardon me. It's undeniable that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS. Whereas AIDS in Western countries continued to be a disease of drug addicts and homosexuals, with women reporting only 19% of US and European AIDS cases. In Africa, 59% of AIDS cases are in women, with 85% of cases occurring in heterosexuals, and the remaining 15% in children. No one has ever explained how a disease largely confined to male homosexuals in the West is a female heterosexual disease in Africa. Quote, AIDS in Africa looks nothing like AIDS in North America or Europe, unquote, observed Duisberg to me. Quote, Africans were rarely tested with expensive PCR tests, so every unexplained death became AIDS. The clinical symptoms of African AIDS are high fever, a persistent cough, loose stools for 30 days, and a 10% loss of body weight over a 2-month period. By that definition, a large percentage of Western tourists have AIDS, while in Africa, the simple cure is to get on a plane back to New York, where no doctor would dream of bestowing an AIDS diagnosis based on that symptomology alone. After 1993, WHO added tuberculosis to the definition. Duisberg told me, quote, it became a garbage pail definition applied to anyone sick with an uncertain diagnosis, unquote. Quote, due to compelling financial drivers in Africa, AIDS is nearly always a presumptive diagnosis applied without any positive reaction to HIV tests. Science journalist Celia Farber told me, quote, big pharma, researchers, clinics, international health agencies, beginning with the WHO, and local governments conspire to keep this stunningly broad and generic clinical definition of AIDS in Africa. From the beginning, it was a signal for funding. They are all in on the joke because they are all helping themselves by skimming the unprecedented international funding streams that flow to African AIDS relief. AIDS is a huge business, possibly the biggest in Africa, says James Shikwati in a 2005 interview with Der Spiegel. Shikwati is founder of the Inter-Region Economic Network, a society for economic promotion in Nairobi, Kenya. Quote, nothing else gets people to fork out money like shocking AIDS figures. AIDS is a political disease here. We should be very skeptical. Former epidemiological director of WHO, Professor James Chin, in his 2006 book, The AIDS Pandemic, The Collision of Epidemiology and Political Correctness, admits unambiguously that the AIDS case figures for developing countries were massively manipulated in order to maintain the flow of billions of dollars. Dr. Rebecca Coolshaw, PhD, a former HIV researcher and professor of mathematical biology and population dynamics at the University of Texas at Tyler, admits that symptomatic pro- admits that quote, the paradox of how a disease could cause both vastly different epidemiologies and symptomatic progressions in the first and third world, unquote, was one of the irreconcilable problems that sowed her initial disillusionment with the HIV AIDS orthodoxy. Quote, the African epidemic looks suspiciously nothing like the American and European epidemic, and closer inspection reveals it likely then that this African epidemic is pure fabrication. Unquote. The questions about widely divergent symptomology of this mysterious disease only amplify when we consider that WHO maintains 12 different descriptions of AIDS, depending upon national boundaries. In 2003, AIDS activist Christine Maggiore told documentarians, quote, in 1993 in this country, we adopted a definition that caused the number of AIDS cases to double overnight. And part of that reason was for the first time, we began counting people as AIDS victims who were not ill and who did not have any symptoms. There's that resonance with today again, right? It's it's astonishingly similar. They had a low T cell count, and that's all. And T cells are something that can fluctuate 100% in a given day. So, based on a low T cell count that year, the number of AIDS cases doubled overnight. And with that definition, there have been 182,000 Americans who are not ill, diagnosed with AIDS, who would not have AIDS if they moved to Canada, because in Canada, they don't recognize the T cell definition as a criteria for having an AIDS diagnosis, unquote. Many U.S. AIDS sufferers can become, quote, cured by crossing the border into Canada. No other disease is so subject to this sort of nationalism. Yeah, I'm just checking in with your comments there. Kathy Sue's mentioning Dr. Mary's monkey. Somebody else asked me about that earlier today in another context, and of course, I spent a lot of time with that book, and I went down and interviewed the author, Ed Haslam. All those videos were on YouTube, and that was my first channel that uh, got struck, knocked out of the park by three strikes, and you're out. And so that was 900 videos just vanished from YouTube. And yeah, I do have them, but going through the computer files and finding them and sorting them out, I mean, it's a nightmare of work that I can't do. I need to just keep doing current stuff and production. So one day maybe they'll be available again. But yeah, Dr. Mary's Monkey is an awesome book, and uh, I really do respect Ed Haslam's work on that. The statistics that he put together, and it's it's as David says, it's hard because you know that not everything in these books is completely reliable, and yet there's so much in them that is worthwhile. That if you can look at these different fact patterns from different points of view and from different facets, like, get a FBI report, but then also get a report from the local cops or from from the CIA, and compare them, and instead of just saying, well, these people are biased or those people are biased, and then turning all their work off. Because these books that I read, I do find that, wow, so many interesting facts are coming into this book, but I don't agree with the conclusion. But so what? You've still got the facts. That's what's important. Facts. My favorite quote from John Adams. He says in the jury on the Boston, uh, the, the trial of the British soldiers in Boston, that he uh, got them acquitted from the charge of murdering a mob member. That his argument to the jury was based on facts, and he'd say, "Facts are stubborn things." I love that. I like, I think a fact is like a tree planted by the water. It shall not be moved. Facts are stubborn things. In May 1984, a month after his momentous press conference, Robert Gallo finally published his paper claiming to have discovered the HIV virus in Science. He also explained in detail his rationale for linking HIV to the AIDS disease by reporting that he had found evidence of the virus in several afflicted gay men. Gallo reported, quote, frequent detection and isolation, unquote, of HIV from patients with AIDS and at risk for AIDS. Scientists were shocked to learn that for the first time that Gallo had found faint traces of HIV in only 26 of the 72 AIDS patients whose blood he examined. That weak conclusion was Gallo's only basis for claiming that HIV might cause AIDS. It is axiomatic that correlation does not prove causation. There were many other viruses, including herpes simplex, cytomegaloviruses, and a range of predatory herpes viruses found with a far higher frequency in AIDS patients, upon which Gallo could have just as easily blamed AIDS. A year earlier, Dr. Luc Montagnier also had only suggested in his May 1983 paper in Science that his claimed virus, quote, may be involved in several pathological syndromes, including AIDS, unquote. Montagnier, a brilliant scientist known for his integrity, had found evidence of HIV in the lymph nodes of 72% of the 44 AIDS patients he tested. Montagnier always remained tentative about claiming the weak correlation as proof. As early as 1992, Montagnier told Nature that, quote, HIV is a necessary but not without the cofactor, a sufficient cause of AIDS. Let me read that again. Uh, HIV is a necessary but not without the cofactor, a sufficient cause of AIDS, unquote. As we shall see, Montague's later statements indicate that his doubts about HIV's role in the etiology of AIDS continued to grow thereafter. Based upon Gallo and Montague's slender scientific reads, these seminal papers introduced the idea that a single, discrete virus was causing the AIDS pandemic. Dr. Fauci has since routinely claimed that HIV was, quote, proven definitively to be the cause of AIDS by Bob Gallo here when he was at NIH, unquote. But other critics argue that evidence in Gallo's article is far too anemic to support Dr. Fauci's characterization. Neither Gallo nor Dr. Fauci has ever demonstrated, using any of the conventional scientific proofs, that the HIV virus alone actually causes AIDS. Rather than allowing his HIV hypothesis to triumph in the marketplace of ideas, Dr. Fauci sent clear signals to the American press that debate on this theory could no longer be tolerated. In September 1989, Dr. Fauci broadcast an angry threat about journalists who dared to give a platform to Peter Duesberg. He ended with this warning, quote, and they should realize that their accuracy is noted by the scientific community. Journalists who have made too many mistakes or who are sloppy are going to find that their access to scientists may diminish, unquote. Instead of using traditional methods for diagnosing disease based on symptoms, Dr. Fauci encouraged doctors to perform blood tests on both healthy and unhealthy individuals to diagnose AIDS. Since none of the available tests are particularly accurate, Dr. Fauci must have understood that his reliance on blood tests alone was likely to yield highly dubious results, capable of dramatically overstating the spread of HIV. In the decade preceding the AIDS crisis, a wave of new technologies, including PCR and superpowerful electron microscopes, had opened windows on teeming new worlds containing millions of species of previously unknown viruses to scientists. Molecular genetics not only revolutionized biological science, but also made that science fabulously profitable. The lure of fame and fortune ignited a chaotic revolution in virology as ambitious young PhDs scrambled to inculpate newly discovered microbes as the cause of old malignancies. Making such connections could be a profitable pursuit for enterprising young biologists and pharmaceutical companies. Under this new rubric, every theoretical breakthrough, every find became potentially the basis for a new generation of drugs. The opportunity to capitalize on the transfer of information transformed researchers into entrepreneurs and their discoveries into, quote, inventions. Science became big business. All this new equipment made science expensive, too expensive to perform without financial support from big pharma and big government. Researchers increasingly relied on Tony Fauci and drug makers to furnish and support their laboratories. Long-term funding became the first requirement of any new research. The researcher got his financing, and Dr. Fauci and the pharmaceutical company got proprietary rights on new discoveries. The self interest of the researcher, the research institution, and the biotech company converged. Finance dictated the direction of research and too often warped its conclusions. Armies of scientists fresh from graduate schools joined the gold rush as Dr. Fauci and Big Pharma grub staked brigades of young PhDs to prospect for novel viruses in the diseased tissues of sick patients. It was often unclear that the new viruses they found in ailing tissues were actually causing the diseases, whether the tiny microbes were free riders colonizing decayed tissue or altogether innocent bystanders. Harvard's Jim Watson, who won the Nobel Prize in 1962 for discovering the molecular structure of DNA, fretted that the quote gold rush mentality was likely to quote scare off the sensible and leave the field to a combination of charlatans and fools unquote. In 2001, alarmed by the precipitous decline in scientific discipline, 14 renowned virologists of the old guard published an appeal to the young high technology focused generation of researchers in science. The graybeards warned the young scientists against attributing culpability to a microbe based upon correlation without first understanding how a newly discovered virus actually causes the disease. Well, I don't know if you can tell or not, but I'm starting to feel little rough in the throat there, and maybe that's because I didn't have my ginger honey tea tonight. But for whatever reason, I think I'm going to call it. Put a lid on it, as I say to Joe Biden and Kamala. You guys are done. Put a lid on it. Oh my God, Democrats. As I my you know wisecrack for today was the Democrats' new slogan is "Make Orange Man Great Again." They are so awful. They're so bad that they're gonna elect Trump as the next. He's going to give Trump a second term just because the Democrats are so awful. All right. Hey, and thank you all very much for being with me. If you want to support the channel, go over to screamingospreys.com and there's a Patreon button there. That's my request if you choose to support. Thanks, everybody. We will see you tomorrow night. I'm going to do a minefields tomorrow night, and I'm, I think maybe I'll do an open chat tomorrow night like I did last Friday. Everybody like that. Um, Professor Hamamoto, you are here. Great. Since certain pharmaceutical stocks are crashing, even Wall Street is rebelling. Yeah, man. Moderna's gone down a lot. I know that. That's a good sign. But all this is very very deep roots. The financing is there for them to just quash the opposition and plow ahead. Um, that's why we have to do what we're doing. This book is a fantastic way to introduce people to the horror of modern science, medicine, to the substitution of these ethically compromised people that follow the philosophy of the Rockefellers that hey we're the superior ones, we're the smart ones, so we can do this, we can manipulate the lesser forms of humanity and make sure that they don't get out of hand and get out of line. We can do that because we obviously were chosen by God to do it. Obvious. Well, we just call on it. Just keep calling them on it. You know, that's what I think all of us agree upon that is we have to call them on it. And when somebody gives you a tool like this, even if you might not agree with everything. I certainly have some disputes with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the climate issues, but why go there when you can take advantage of this this incredibly well written narrative? It has a lot of power to it, I believe. So, okay, everybody, have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.